Champion Stakes. It's got Baaeed at 1.25 at the top of the betting. I mean, I put Baaeed up as a lay in the Judd one. I'm not going to do that again because that was just silly. Adayar 8.0. Oh, for last year's Derby winner, Baybridge 18.5, My Prospero 55, Dubai on 100, and Royal Champion 110. Charlie, first of all, that's just a sign of how good Baaeed is, because you've got Adayar 8.0. You've got Baybridge 18.5, who's, I remember when he won at Sandown, which is where I am today, he looked a proper horse. How are you playing this, Charlie?
Yeah, completely, Tom. I'm going to play Baybridge in the place market, definitely. Like you say, we go back to Sandown at the beginning of the season, and he was being sort of heralded as the next big thing. I mean, things didn't really. I mean, I thought he ran fine behind State of Rest, and you know, it didn't really happen for him in the Eclipse at Sandown. But it was, I don't know, it was kind of a messy race. They all finished in a bit of a heat. I just think, yeah, going back to that Sandown run where he won so impressively, if you can bounce back to that level of form, something's got to finish second to Baaeed, and I suppose you're probably looking at it. Are you going with Adayar or Baybridge? And just at the prices, I've come down with Baybridge. So yeah, I'm just going to play him in the place market. I think, and I hope Baaeed is unbeatable. I mean, it'd almost be a real shame to see him get beat on this his sort of last race course start. So fingers crossed he gets the job done, and Baybridge can chase him home.
Steve, why for you is an Adayar the most likely horse to finish second to Baaeed? Or maybe he is, but you just think price wise, Baybridge is the selection.
I think Baybridge is a lot more solid than Adayar. We've only seen Adayar once at Doncaster last month. Now, that doesn't bode well for me for a horse that you want them to come into it. But he was apparently a bit like you were in your youth, a bit of a chubster at Doncaster. In fact, he was pretty much very overweight. Well, you not seen the photos of Tommy at the races at the Hog Roast? I mean, you wouldn't believe it.
No, that's got to be one for the podcast sometime. I'd like to see that. Yeah,
you wouldn't believe it. A little chubster holding the horse in one hand and the pork roll in the other.
Can I just say, right? This was at Warwick when my dad's first horse my dad ever had, and the last as well. And it won first time out of Warwick, and I was a 15 stone 14-year-old, and yes, I had a hog roast that day, but obviously wasn't stood in the winner's enclosure holding the horse in one hand and a pork roll in the other. Those two things didn't happen at the same time. Just like to point out.
Apple sauce going everywhere.
Yeah, and crackling. Oof. I still remember the crackling from that day.
Anyway, that's what Adayar was like last time. And he's beaten two horses. I know Mazakela was, what was he, fourth in the Derby or something, but he was beating horses that over a mile and two that he should have been beating. And I just think over this distance, even on the softer ground, that he's going to struggle to have the pace, I think, of a horse like Baybridge, who I think the reason why he hasn't perhaps lived up to his early season promise, where he was devastating in the Brigadier Gerard, and then ran okay at ASCOT and was disappointing when favourite for the Eclipse. I mean, that's the thing. He's favourite over Verdani and Mishrif and Native Trail. And I just purely think it was the fast ground. I think this horse brings his knees up a long way. And Sir Michael Stout clearly realised that his race was going to be the Champion Stakes, and he's got his ground. I think it'd be perfect. I don't think it's going to be desperate ground by any means. It's just probably going to be proper autumn, soft, flat ground. And that makes him very, very interesting. I mean, he's not going to beat Baaeed if Baaeed runs anywhere near it. But I just think that he's the standout to be second. And I think he's a really nice horse. And he's been trained in a very similar way to Baaeed, because William Haggis and Sir Michael Stout are patient trainers. And I think there's a lot more petrol in the tank in Baybridge coming back from 3 months off. So, which shouldn't be a big problem, because he won first time out in his last 2 seasons. So, in fact, when he's returning from breaks of days in 3 figures, he's won all 3. So this is a case for saying he's very good when fresh. So I think he's an excellent bet in the place market. I really do.
And were you backing without the favourite as well? So place bet and without the favourite.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go. I'll judge on the prices and which is the better value. But yeah, I think it is a good race for place betting. The 9 runners with. You would hope that you could rule 3 or 4 out straight away. So I think it's a very, very good bet, to be honest. I think I can see why people might be interested in My Prospero at big prices, because the 3-year-olds have got a decent enough record in the race. And he did earlier in the season. Obviously, he was very unlucky not to win at ASCOT in the St James's Palace, and has since won on easy ground in France, but he's coming back from a break as well.
So you've riled me up now, Steve. You've riled me up to have a go. So if we can come back to the top of the betting, there's Baybridge 18.5, ADR 8.0. Baaeed is 1.25. Do we think he's going to trade bigger than that in the run? Definitely. Out of stall 1, I definitely think he will. If William Haggis was sitting down trying to work this race out before the draw was made, I think he'd have gone, what I really don't want is Baaeed drawn 1 and my other 2 horses drawn wide. And that's what's happened. Because it hands some sort of advantage to William Buick and to, who's on Baybridge? Kingscote or Moore?
Yeah,
Kingscote.
It hands some sort of advantage to them from 4 and 6 to be able to know where Baaeed is the whole way. And that's the one horse they're trying to get beat. So what does Jim Crowley do out of 1? He's not going to say, I was speaking to George Baker about this last night, he's not going to go left hand down straight away, is he, out the gates? I was watching back Al Manzoor, who won this from stall 1. And he did get the perfect split to open up, but there was a point turning for home where he was 3 back on the rail and you were going, whoa, is this going to open up all right? So I think it complicates it enough for Jim that he's going to have to do something. And there's a huge chance that he's going to trade bigger than 1.25. So I'm going to put Baaeed up as a lay to back. And I'd put it in at something like 1.5. That's all you got. Just the fat chat's got me riled, Jonesy.
Yeah, but you're looking good now, Tommy.
But Baaeed as
Racing's #1 pin-up.
A lay.
Do you think he will be that far back though, Tom? How do you think he's going to ride him, Jim, tomorrow? I
think he will. So Adayar will come out. William Buick is going to want to sit in front of Baaeed. And I think he's going to want to sit with almost Adayar's arse where Baaeed's head is, if that makes sense, if he can. I think that Haggis is going to want My Prospero. He's going to want one of his horses to go forward, I think, and have some sort of a say on what happens up top. Who else is going to go forward? Probably Stone Age will be up there, do you think?
You would imagine so.
He's been used as a pacemaker, though, hasn't he?
Yeah.
So it's a red herring.
Maybe they'll ride him differently. Yeah, yes, I think that Jim is going to want to sit too wide, and I don't think he's going to be able to. And I think that there's a chance he will find himself 3 back on the rail, because he's not going to want to. If it's a real test over this trip, that is going into the unknown somewhat. So I don't think he's going to want to massively force the issue. But you can't ride a horse like Baaeed for luck, can you? You can't come back into the winner's enclosure having finished second and got no run and go, I didn't quite work out on the day, but it's Baaeed. So I suppose he's going to want to be active out the gates and maybe look to sit too wide. But if he can't get there, I just think stall 1 is not ideal. He wouldn't have picked that. He'd have picked 2 to 9 over 1, I think. And so I think it's worth taking advantage of the fact that he's 1.25 on the biggest test to date, and I'm going to lay to back for fun, because that's what you can do with the exchange.
Yeah.
Where do you think he'll sit, Charlie? Where do you think his ideal position is?
I mean, like you say, it's a real. I suppose if there is an interesting story to the race, it is how it's going to play out for Jim Crowley. I mean, and like this is the sort of day where it is huge pressure on the rider, isn't it? You know, everyone is expecting a sort of coronation and the perfect ending, and it's not the ideal scenario. Like you say, we're probably going to have slower ground than he's really encountered, certainly over this trip. There's stamina that he's going to have to confirm even more so than York. I think he'd like, if he thought the horse was definitely going to relax and do everything right, I think he'd love to just follow the pace and sit in the box seat. Whether he's going to be not confident enough to do that, but whether he's going to be ballsy enough to take that chance, because of course if he does get lit up and then travel too strong, it's the last place he wants to be. So yeah, I suppose there is a chance he is going to sit probably third back on the rail if that's the way it plays out, and in which case he's going to have to hope for the splits at the right moments. But I would imagine if he is down the rail, the first possible chance he can get when they sort of turn up from Swinley Bottom and race up the hill, he's going to try and maneuver off the rail, you would imagine, wouldn't you? So that when he turns in, he's mid-track and he has options to go inside or outside, wherever the split's going to come. I wouldn't think he's going to want to turn in boxed him down the fence and have only one option open to him, and that's hoping it opens up in front of him or down the inside.
Yeah. Also, because we've only got 6 races, so I want to delve slightly deeper into the quality of this race versus last time, Steve, if we can. Last time he beat Mishrif by 6.5 lengths, easy as you like. This is Mishrif, who isn't as good as he was. He was beaten 2.5 lengths in an Irish Champion Stakes off the back of it when disappointing, and beaten 18 lengths in an ARC. He beat Sabuska a 100 to 1 shot by a further 2.5 lengths, and then his stable companion Debana was a short head back in 4th. Like, I'm not crabbing his performance on the day, but how much a better race do you think this is?
I mean, Mishrif went into it in form. That was the thing. What he's shown since. I know he blew out in the King George, but he'd only been beaten a neck when unlucky in the Eclipse. So he wasn't beating up a horse that had completely lost his form. I just think that it's easy to take a dim view of that form because he was such an impressive winner, and that's what he's done throughout his career.
Mishrif went into it having been beaten 11 lengths in the King George.
Yeah, but previous to that, he'd been beaten a neck in the Eclipse.
Well, yeah, but he won the Saudi Cup 3 years ago. But that was 3 years ago.
Yeah,
and the argument then
was only in July.
But Steve, the question is tomorrow a better race than York?
If you look back on it, possibly, because he's beaten them up and you can pick holes in it. Would you be saying that on the day?
We've already got him out to 1.26, lads. That's a great. Keep going. It'd be 1.3. I mean,
you forget that Native Trail was in there as well. I mean, Native Trail was a Guineas winner who'd again finished beaten half a length in the Eclipse.
I suppose what I'm trying to get at is that is there any way you can look at his price and say that's justified? There is a way you can say it's justified. Is there any way you could look at it negatively and say, has he really earned that sort of price, and question it, or are you happy with that, Steve?
Well, I think he would have to get into all sorts of trouble to go out to 1.5 that you're hoping for him to go out to. I just don't see that happening, to be honest. I think Jim Crowley is although he's in stall 1, he's in a very advantageous position because he's on by far the best horse, and he'll have a plan, whether it goes to plan or not. But I think you can overthink this. Are those other jockeys thinking, oh, well, we've got to box him in? And I don't think you go into with that. You want to try and get the best position you can, not continually looking for the favourite and trying to get him beat, and then realise that you finished 7th when you could have finished 4th because of it. I don't get that. I just think he's an exceptional horse that has got exceptional gears. The way he went through the York race, was just Jim. I know it opens up so much at York because they come down the middle, but he could have put him in anywhere he wanted at any point of the last 3 furlongs.
I do think though that it is exciting because I think you go back to Adeo, that's a King George winner, Derby winner, 4th in an ARC. If he is back at peak form, he does present possibly the strongest test that he's faced, certainly this season, since he beat Palace Pier on Champions Day last year. And again, Bay Bridge, if he can get to that level of Sandown earlier in the year and show that he is as good as what he's been talked up from home and on reputation, I do think it's exciting, as in, potentially he does, he could go out, and Baaeed, I think, will win, but he could go out posting a career best.
I think he has. I think if he wins this as well as the Juddmonte, because I think this is a better race on paper, I think it will be. Yeah, I think he'll win. I just like you. I think it's almost, it could pan out more exciting than the market has it, and that's what I guess I'm looking to exploit. And against Adea, he's on a very strong stayer at 10. And given where William Buick's drawn, that could just hand not an advantage to William Buick, but in terms of respectively where they're drawn, that hands some sort of onus to him to sit ahead of him and make sure it doesn't turn into a crawl and pounce, because then Adea is stuffed.
The thing you're missing with Adea as well, he was very free. I know he'd run in the Arc last year, but he was incredibly keen in this race last year. Well, if he does that this year, then William Buick's got far, far, far more problems than Jim Crowley has.
What I would say, this for Adea was definitely an afterthought last year.
William absolutely.
He was chasing the championship, William Buick.
But he is dropping in distance.
Yeah.
And was he over the top last year? I would argue. I mean, he comes in here fresh. I mean, and he was beat 3 lengths under what ended up a very aggressive ride in the Arc. Maybe more because Adea wanted that than William Buick did. But you'd think drop back to 10 furlongs, and you'd imagine. I mean, there is some rain forecast, but you'd have thought it's just going to be nice ground rather than horrendously testing. He's surely going to ride him aggressively and try and stretch Baaeed out.
Oh, I'm excited. Right, good. We spent 20 minutes on this race because I think it is a really exciting contest. For all, we've got a 1.26 shot at the top.